it's cool for us to see, for me personally, probably you too, like the production side of things.
Yes.
Like we're there all day long filming, and we get so sick of them. No offense.
For years, Ashley Morrill was impossible to miss on Maine Cabin Masters. Alongside her brother Chase Morrill and her husband Ryan Eldridge, she became one of the defining personalities of the show. And then, just like that, she was gone. Was she sick? Had she been pregnant? Was she leaving the show? Had something happened between her and Chase? Or had she simply stepped away from television? The rumors multiplied, but what was actually unfolding behind the scenes? Today, we'll answer exactly that. So, what really happened to Ashley Morrill from Maine Cabin Masters? Let's start from the beginning. Did she earn her place in the Kennebec Cabin Company? In short, yes. Before the cameras ever arrived, Ashley Morrill grew up in Maine alongside her brother Chase, with their father, Eric Morrill, working as a builder and teaching his children the value of repairing, reusing, and making something useful out of what others might throw away. Eric's influence wasn't simply family lore. The official Maine Cabin Masters episode guide later revealed that he had personally renovated the Foster family's historic cabin years before Ashley and Chase returned to renovate it again. The cabin had belonged to the Fosters since 1871, making the project a literal connection between the work of one generation of Morrills and the next. Ashley eventually took a different route from Chase. While he became the builder at the center of the operation, she developed the design side of the family tradition, studying art and design, and eventually becoming the person responsible for the interiors and visual character of their projects. When Maine Cabin Masters first reached television, she wasn't a stranger brought in to give the show a female personality. On January 10, 2017, Maine Public introduced Chase, Ashley, and Ryan Eldridge together as the people behind the new DIY Network series, describing Ashley specifically as Chase's sister and the show's designer. The official premise already had the family structure viewers would later become familiar with: Chase building, Ashley designing, and Ryan working alongside them. But there was a painful chapter immediately behind that television debut. Eric Morrill died in 2014 after cancer, only a few years before the family would become nationally recognizable. He was a builder, furniture maker, metal sculptor, and intensely creative man who left behind his recently married daughter Ashley, her husband Ryan, and his son Chase. That timing gave Ashley's eventual television career an emotional dimension that is easy to miss when watching the finished renovations. She wasn't simply entering a new profession, she was carrying forward a family tradition after losing the person who had helped shape it. Then came the gamble. Maine Cabin Masters premiered on DIY Network in January 2017, with its first episode following the crew as they tackled the Daggett camp. The series wasn't an instant certainty. Chase later told Down East that producers had warned the crew that most pilots never became series, and even successful first seasons often ended quickly. Yet, the show kept going. By early 2022, it had reached its 100th episode and was entering its 7th season, having become one of DIY Network's highest-rated programs. Chase said they originally expected to film one pilot and simply have some stories to tell. They weren't looking for fame or fortune, and that is where Ashley's story becomes stranger. The woman who had been there from the beginning eventually became the subject of questions asking where she had gone. Some viewers scrutinized changes in her appearance. Others interpreted ordinary sibling arguments with Chase as evidence of a feud, while online rumors began attaching increasingly serious explanations to her life. So, what had actually happened to her? The rumors started with what people could see. The first rumors about Ashley Morrill began with people watching her on television and deciding that her appearance had changed. Over the seasons of Maine Cabin Masters, viewers noticed periods when Ashley looked heavier and other periods when she appeared slimmer. That alone would normally be unremarkable. But once a television personality becomes familiar to millions of people, even ordinary changes can become material for speculation. Internet folks began asking whether Ashley had gained weight, lost weight, or whether there was some explanation the audience was not being told. Thus came the pregnancy theory. Some viewers interpreted Ashley's fuller appearance, particularly around her midsection, as a possible sign that she was expecting a child. There was, however, no public announcement from Ashley confirming a pregnancy. The rumor illustrates how quickly a visual observation can become a supposed fact. Once enough people repeat it, a few photographs become comparisons. Comparisons become theories, and eventually the theory is discussed as though there must have been an announcement that everyone somehow missed. But there is a basic problem with that logic. A person's appearance cannot establish whether she is pregnant. As the discussion continued, it also became increasingly focused on Ashley's body rather than the reason she was actually on the show. She was the designer helping transform Maine's aging camps, working alongside her brother Chase, husband Ryan Eldridge, Matt Dixie Dix, and Jared Jedi Baker. Yet online conversations could reduce all of that to screenshots comparing how she looked in one season with how she looked in another. Even more revealingly, the speculation did not disappear when Ashley became slimmer. It simply changed direction. If the weight gain had supposedly meant pregnancy, then what did the later weight loss mean? And that is where an ordinary internet rumor began, moving into much more serious territory. The next theory was that Ashley might be sick. One of the claims that began circulating was that she had multiple sclerosis. Suddenly, a change in appearance was no longer being interpreted as a possible pregnancy, but as evidence of a serious neurological disease. This is where the story needs a hard, factual line. Ashley Morrill never publicly disclosed an MS diagnosis. In fact, the sources repeating the rumor generally do not produce a statement from Ashley, a physician, an interview, or a reputable news report confirming it. And then the investigation turns up something even stranger. You see, there's this other woman, also named Ashley Morrill, whose medical and disability history appears in a United States District Court case involving conditions including autism-related disorders, attention deficit disorder, sensory integration problems, and auditory processing issues. Some people subsequently presented that court material as though it belonged to the Maine Cabin Masters' personality. This goes to show how a rumor can acquire an apparently authoritative paper trail without actually proving anything about the person being discussed. One Ashley Morrill has a documented court case. Another Ashley Morrill is a television personality from Maine. Once names, biographies, and search results became mixed together, information about one woman could easily be mistaken for information about the other. The MS rumor therefore becomes less a mystery about what Ashley Morrill was hiding and more a mystery about how the internet manufactures certainty. And throughout all of this, Ashley herself continued appearing publicly with the same crew. The Ashley Morrill people see on television what viewers see when they watch Ashley Morrill on Maine Cabin Masters is easy to misread because her role is different from the men usually shown swinging hammers and tearing out walls. Ashley is the crew's designer and decorator, working with the homeowner's needs. The character of each cabin, colors, furnishings, reclaimed materials, and the small details that turn a structurally sound camp into a finished space. The network itself describes her as Chase Morrill's sister and Ryan Eldridge's wife within the team, while the show's own material places her firmly inside the core operation rather than presenting her as a performer added simply to fill a television role. You see, one of the most persistent criticisms of Ashley comes from watching her alongside carpenters whose jobs are visibly physical. On fan forums, some viewers have accused her of avoiding the hardest manual work, becoming irritated when Chase or the crew ask her to help with construction, or receiving credit for projects that other people physically built. Those are viewer interpretations, not established facts. Other longtime viewers make the opposite argument. Ashley is the designer, not the lead carpenter, and expecting her to spend every scene hauling materials or framing walls misunderstands the division of labor. Some fans specifically point out that she does paint, cut materials, and perform hands-on work when the project requires it. Then there is the relationship viewers think they see between Ashley and Chase. Their arguments have become part of the show's mythology. To one audience member, a sharp exchange can look like genuine resentment between a brother and sister who can barely stand working together. To another, it looks unmistakably like ordinary family bickering. The evidence outside the edited episodes is considerably less dramatic. Chase has repeatedly spoken about Ashley as part of the original group, alongside Ryan, Matt, Dixie Dix, and Jared Jedi Baker. And the family's professional operation has continued expanding rather than fracturing. In a recent interview, Ashley even described how her original design team consisted of Chase, Ryan, Dixie, and Jedi before the business grew enough for her to have several people assisting her. One of the clearest windows into that earlier period comes from Down East, which profiled Chase when the series was still young. He remembered being warned that most television pilots never become series, and that even successful shows rarely make it to a second season. Yet Maine Cabin Masters eventually reached its 100th episode and became one of DIY Network's biggest programs. Chase also made an unusually revealing admission. The crew sometimes employed unorthodox methods for the sake of good TV, including using a boat to remove the facade of a cabin. Next comes the show's biggest controversy: the money. Viewers have repeatedly looked at a cabin being dramatically rebuilt for a budget that seems absurdly low compared with conventional renovation shows. The crew's own FAQ directly addresses the question and says the budgets shown are real, but the nature of those budgets matters. The company explains that many Maine camps are seasonal properties, meaning they do not necessarily require the insulation, finishes, or systems expected in a year-round luxury home. The projects also emphasize practicality, reuse, and getting neglected cabins functional again, rather than turning them into expensive houses. Chase has explained the philosophy himself. They are renovating rustic camps, not building upscale mansions, but that is not to say all speculation lacks any foundation. The scandal that actually happened. In 2020, the company behind renovations featured on Maine Cabin Masters became the subject of a federal enforcement action over alleged violations of the Environmental Protection Agency's lead renovation, repair, and painting rule. The case involved Kennebec Property Services, LLC, the Manchester, Maine company that performs renovations featured on the program. The EPA alleged that 5 residential renovation projects carried out that year did not comply with federal lead safety requirements. The 5 properties identified by the EPA were residential buildings constructed before 1978. You see, federal restrictions on the residential use of lead-based paint took effect that year, and older buildings can still contain layers of lead paint beneath newer coats. When workers cut, sand, scrape, demolish, or otherwise disturb those surfaces, they can create lead-contaminated dust. The EPA warns that even small amounts of lead dust can affect children, which is why contractors working on covered pre-1978 properties are subject to specific certification, containment, cleaning, information, and record-keeping requirements. According to the EPA's formal allegations, the problems went beyond one missed piece of paperwork. The agency said Kennebec had failed to obtain the required firm recertification before beginning renovations, failed to assign a certified renovator to each project, failed in some cases to provide owners with the EPA-approved lead hazard information pamphlet, and failed to maintain records demonstrating compliance with the required procedures. Those are serious regulatory requirements because the entire purpose of the lead RRP system is to prevent renovation activity from turning old paint into hazardous dust. The enforcement action was resolved through a settlement, which was announced on October 18, 2022. Kennebec Property Services agreed to pay a $16,500 civil penalty and to come into compliance with the lead RRP rule. The company also agreed to an unusual form of corrective action. It would use the television platform itself to educate viewers about lead-safe renovation practices. At least 3 upcoming episodes were to include information about compliance, while the company's From the Woodshed podcast would feature an episode dealing with EPA lead safety measures. And the EPA made its reasoning unusually explicit. Larry Starfield, then the agency's acting assistant administrator for enforcement and compliance assurance, said remodeling programs have a special responsibility to model lead-safe practices because viewers may watch what professionals do and imitate it themselves. You see, Maine Cabin Masters was not simply renovating private cabins out of public view. Its work was being filmed, broadcast, and potentially used by homeowners as an example of how renovation should be performed. The agency's settlement therefore treated the show's educational influence as part of the problem and part of the solution. But this is exactly where internet retellings can distort what actually happened. There is no evidence in the EPA settlement that Ashley Morrill personally committed the alleged violations, was individually fined, or was diagnosed with lead poisoning. The respondent named in the federal action was Kennebec Property Services, LLC. Nor does the settlement establish that the cast knowingly endangered homeowners or viewers. What it establishes is narrower and more defensible. The EPA alleged regulatory violations during 5 renovations, and the company settled the matter by paying the penalty and agreeing to corrective measures. This brings us back to our original question. What really happened to Ashley Morrill? By now, the question almost sounds like a missing person mystery. What really happened to Ashley Morrill? But when you follow the trail beyond old photographs, message boards, and recycled celebrity stories, the answer is surprisingly ordinary. Ashley did not disappear from the world of design. She appears to have been expanding beyond the version of herself that viewers knew from Maine Cabin Masters. The clearest example arrived in 2023, when she announced a new home decor venture called Rustic County. The message behind it was revealing. After years of designing for Maine Cabin Masters, Ashley said she wanted to create something that was 100% from me. And the timing makes sense when you look at Ashley's interests away from television. Her official Maine Cabin Masters biography identifies her as the show's designer, while an earlier profile revealed that she enjoys oil painting and had even planned an art room in the home she built with Ryan Eldridge. She had also spoken about her love of local Maine art and using community artists and craftspeople in her cabin designs. Rustic County, therefore, did not appear out of nowhere. It looked more like a natural extension of a side of Ashley that had always been there but was difficult to fit into a television format built around renovating cabins under a deadline. The original Rustic County plan was modest but telling. Ashley said the first release would feature throw pillows with floral artwork and a distinctly home decor-oriented aesthetic. In other words, she was no longer simply designing a room for somebody else's cabin and then walking away when the cameras stopped. She was attempting to put her own creative identity onto products that people could take home. And today, Rustic County is still represented within the Kennebec Cabin Company's online shop, alongside categories for decorative art, blankets and pillows, home essentials, and other cabin-related goods. That ecosystem itself had already grown far beyond the original television premise. The Kennebec Cabin Company operates a retail shop and the Woodshed restaurant, bar, and event venue in Manchester, Maine. The company says its headquarters grew out of the historic Daggett property that appeared in the very first episode, and the operation now hosts music, events, and visitors throughout the year. The official Maine Cabin Masters site continues to identify Ashley as the designer, while the show itself remains active. The 13th season of Maine Cabin Masters aired in 2026, with Ashley still listed among the principal cast alongside Chase, Ryan, Dixie, and Jedi. More recently, the entire group was brought together again for Maine Cabin Masters All In, a new spin-off centered on Chase and his wife Sarah Morrill's purchase and renovation of a 12-acre, 9-bedroom bed and breakfast in Monmouth, Maine. Ashley and Ryan are part of that project too. Whatever happened to the version of Ashley some viewers remembered, she clearly did not disappear from the family operation. Now the rumors begin to collapse one by one. The pregnancy story was never established by a public announcement and rested primarily on viewers interpreting changes in Ashley's appearance. The S story has no credible evidence establishing that Ashley publicly disclosed such a diagnosis, while the material circulating online appears to have been complicated by another woman with the same name. The disability claims similarly trace back to records that do not reliably identify the Maine Cabin Masters personality. None of those stories becomes stronger simply because another website repeats it. If anything, the repetition is part of the mystery. The same applies to the supposed feud with Chase. And that leaves an almost perfect irony. The stories that generated the most dramatic speculation are precisely the stories for which the evidence is weakest. The controversy with the strongest documentary trail is the one that has relatively little to do with Ashley personally: the federal lead safety enforcement action. Meanwhile, the woman supposedly missing from the public eye was still designing, still connected to the Cabin Masters, still part of the family business, and by 2026, still appearing in new television projects. Ashley Morrill did not need a secret disappearance, devastating diagnosis, hidden affair, or dramatic falling out to explain the changes people noticed. Her career simply evolved. Her appearance changed because people's appearances change. Her professional identity expanded because creative careers expand. The show itself evolved, and the business around it grew. But somewhere along the way, viewers began treating every ordinary change as a clue in a mystery. And people on the internet seem to have way too much free time on their hands. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.